Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to Storytime with Chris James, and I will pick up right where I left off. The bouncy trip went on for forever. Pam alternated trying to squeeze her eyes shut and then wake up laying in bed. If not her bed, then the tent would do in a pinch. This didn't seem to work the way Pam was hoping it would. Whoever was running rampant through the woods with Pam draped over one shoulder was not having any difficulty with the lack of light. It, or he, or maybe she, began to climb up a cliff. Once more, Pam found her mind wandering back to that kung fu movie. I don't want to see any T-Rex monsters trying to eat me. Thinking better about it, she came up with, I don't want to see anything trying to eat me. Now, that was not good enough. I don't want to die. I haven't even seen the Alamo yet. Her dad had told her way back when she was young it was a requirement for everybody born in Texas to visit and to remember the Alamo. Or did he just say to remember it? As this hair-covered creature pulled itself as well as Pam up the side of what felt like a very high cliff, Pam was struck by the realization there were no such cliffs to be found in the piney woods, or in northeast Texas for that matter. I must be dreaming. Maybe I died and this is what it feels like to be carried away to the next world. Pam made a note to see if she could track down Sharma and visit. They could compare notes on what it was like to be dead. The creature entered a cave. Pam only figured this out as the entrance to the cave passed by her less than adequate vision. Lots of rocks and things that looked like what you'd find in an old unused cave. If this is an unused cave, then who's using it? The creature came to a stop and dropped Pam to the ground. She let go with an ow and felt more bruises growing on top of the bruises that she'd already gotten yesterday. The cave was lit by some flickering source. It looked exactly what a cave should look like lit by a campfire. Pam sat up to get a better look. How many times do I have to tell you, don't drop your things in the living room like that? This sounded very much like her mother, only a lot deeper and less human. It followed me home. Can I keep it? What do you mean, it followed you home? Oh, no, you picked up a squealer. You don't know where that thing has been. It might be covered with diseases or worse. Squealer was the derogatory name given to humans because of the noises made when Sasquatch ran into them. Kind of a high-pitched squealing noise. I'll take care of it. I'll even clean up after it if it poops in our cave. Now Pam knew she was either dreaming or dead. I promise I won't poop in your cave, Pam said, figuring it was her dream and she should be able to assert some of her own ideas. The silence was deafening. Two very large, hair-covered heads turned and looked at Pam. Uh-oh. I think they're going to eat me now. Did that come out loud? Oh, my Lord, it can speak. I didn't know. Maybe I should just throw it over the edge of the cliff. You can't do that. That would almost be like murder. No, it would be murder. Don't throw it. Don't throw me. Don't throw me off any cliff. Pam hoped to reason with her soon to be killers. The bigger of the pair placed one hand over its mouth. This made Pam think more about how her mother would react to some of her less than reasonable ideas. It can speak, and it seems to understand what we're saying. The shorter of the pair had moved to a place the bigger one between it and Pam, as if she might do something or bite. "What are we going to do?" the shorter one said. "Wait till your father gets home. We'll let him figure it out." So the bigger one must be the mother. Donna fretted about how to broach the subject of losing her sister's kid to her sister. She would have to drive home to use the phone since there wasn't a cell tower anywhere near her. She'd use something she'd read about one time, something called tact. I was doing a real good job keeping an eye on her, but she just wandered off. No, that might not work. She considered waiting until it stopped raining and try searching for the kid by herself. She can't have wandered too far. She should be close-ish. Donna felt just a tiny bit to blame for Pam's disappearance. Pam felt cold. It helped not at all that she was soaked from the rain, and she wasn't dressed for hiking in the mountains, even if she hadn't been the one doing the hiking. The fire looked nice and warm from her side of the cave. It wasn't her side of anything, but since the two big hairy things were staying on their side, it kind of felt a reason this was her side, if only for a little bit of time. If I were to move over there, by the fire, you guys wouldn't kill me, would you? Pam tried to use her most friendly and non-appetizing voice. "Oh no, it wants to move over near us. What do we do?" This sounded like the younger of the two. "Try not to encourage it. Maybe it'll wander off." This sounded a lot like the mother. "But Mom, it's talking to us." This sounded more like a whine. Don't be ridiculous. Everybody knows those things don't really speak. They just mimic our voices." Pam was getting colder and more desperate. "I won't touch anything. Just let me get warm by the fire." La 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 la. Pam looked closely at the bigger one. It was holding its hands over its ears, making a noise that sounded like, "I can't hear you." Pam's fear was replaced by her wish to not freeze to death. As she had found a dislike of cold ever since she'd nearly frozen to death last week. Was that just last week? She stood up and slowly walked over closer to the fire. As she drew near, the two creatures both pulled away. The big one was doing the pulling, and the smaller one was staring at Pam. "It looks almost human." "Mom, it looks almost squatchy." It held out one hand and wiggled the fingers. "Come on, I won't hurt you." It then made what sounded like a cooing sound. Pam wasn't too interested in whether it had some food or for her or not. She wanted some warmth. Pam moved over to the fire and instantly felt better. Maybe they won't eat her after all. "When your father gets home, we'll let him decide what to do with it." The mother released the younger creature. "Just don't get too close. It might bite." Pam sat down near the fire and rubbed her arms. "This is some weird weather we're having. Maybe this is an after effect of the cursed case." Pam tried to not focus on what kind of decisions the father might be about to make. Just as Pam was coming to terms with what seemed to be her situation, the father arrived. "I'm home, dear. What's for dinner?" He must have stood all of 8 feet tall. His shoulders were as broad as Pam was tall. He looked like a very hard case to deal with. The mother pulled on his arm and got the father set down by the fire. "You know how Junior is always dragging things home? Things we really don't need or want." She was patting him on the arm. Pam tried her invisibility device. It looks as if he's found himself one of those things. Her finger pointed at Pam. I guess my invisibility device isn't working. She considered running. Would it be better to freeze to death in the dark recesses of this cave, or stay here dry, warm, and dead? What on earth is that? He yelled, loud enough to be heard in the next county over. Get me a stick. I'll take care of this. Pam tried to look cute and non-threatening. Now, dear, you know we shouldn't go around killing things just because we don't like their icky looks. The mother was kind of holding the father down. I can talk. It sounds as if I can understand. It can talk. It sounds as if it can understand us. The son was beside himself with enthusiasm. Watch this. The boy turned to Pam. Sit. Come on, sit. Pam was already on the ground, and she couldn't sit any harder. How about if I stand up and then I sit down? The father nearly fell over backwards. What on earth? It can speak. Standing up, he moved back away from Pam. Considering he was at least 3 feet taller than her, Pam found this just a bit reassuring, until he grabbed a huge club. Pam retreated to the back of the cave, well, as far as the fire's heat could reach. I don't bite, and I'm housebroken. Now she felt really good about herself. Housebroken indeed. Pam, the father, whispered to his wife. It can speak. What will we do? The club was held in front of him, but it was more of a shield than a weapon. Can we keep it? Huh? Can we? The son was jumping around like an ape. What will the neighbors say? The father looked at the mother, whom Pam assumed was the wife as well. A flash of inspiration came to Pam. I know. How about you get Junior to take me back to where he found me? This sounded like a reasonable idea. Quoo, where did you find this thing? The father pulled the kid around to face him. Let's see, I was running around down by the swamp. The swamp? You know you're not supposed to go near that place. That's where you'll find those things. The father aimed one huge hair-covered hand at Pam. Well, I think it'd be a good idea to put it back before he gets too attached to it. The mother was being a typical mother. Oh, man, the son obviously wasn't too keen on the idea. I wanted to show it to my friends. No friends. You must promise me you won't show this thing to anyone. And no telling either. He looked over one shoulder as if expecting someone with a camera to be standing there clicking pictures of him and the thing. Pam noticed whenever they referred to it or the thing, it seemed to be aimed at her. I'm standing right here. You don't have to call me names. My name is Pam Bogus. The three looked at Pam as if she were some bizarre creature. Pam considered how the three looked, and then she thought about how, just maybe, she would look kind of odd to these creatures. The son took it on himself to acknowledge her. My name is Quoo, and this is my mom. She's also known as Makata, and that's my dad, Duke. The names were meaningless to Pam's ears. Her interpretation of the sounds came as close to it would ever be able. Hi, Pam stuck out her hand. The three pulled back, but then the father, trying to look brave to his kid, held out one hand as well. He did just as Pam had done, but didn't know a handshake from a milkshake. Pam grasped his hand and gave it one good up and down and then let go. The creature looked at his hand as if he might want to scrub it under some really hot water. We were about to have dinner. Would you join us? Makata said. Well, that depends. Am I on the menu? This got zero response. Sure, what are you having? The three hairy creatures all gathered around a flat rock sitting on a smaller rock. Pam could just reach it with her chin. The mother pulled a smaller rock over and set it securely on top of what was to be Pam's seat. We used this for Quoo back when he was still too small for a regular chair. Great. Pam was now sitting in a high chair. Well, when in Rome, don't do anything to piss off the senators. Pam's uncle used to say that all the time. Her Uncle Carl, not Ray. The food was kind of good considering Pam was near starved to death. And not literally, but figuratively. She'd only had rice and beans for dinner, and again for breakfast, but that seemed to be a long time ago. Once her stomach was full of some kind of cooked meat and some green things and a few yellowish things, Pam felt more like a guest than an intruder or a prisoner. Okay, son, now tell me, did you pick her up on the north side of the swamp or the south side? Well, actually, it was the east side. He sounded like he didn't want to say it. The father sounded as if he didn't want to hear this. The east side? Then you went all the way through the swamp. He sounded a bit pissed off now. Well, yeah, I was kind of far in there. It was quiet, the kind of quiet just before the storm hits and kills everyone. I swore I'd never do that far again. This came from the father. Every time one of our people goes into the swamp to the other side, bad things happen. The mother reached over and hugged him. You can do it. Just don't let those clicky things catch your spirit. Pam found this last question in need of asking. What are the clicky things you mentioned? Those weird little boxes, they give off a clicking sound and then they steal your soul. That sounds like a trail cam. They don't really steal your soul, just your image. Our image is our soul. The mother gave Pam a long look. It's like it sucks some of our being out with each tiny click. Does it radiate out in all directions or just one direction? Kind of everywhere at once. That might explain why so many photos of you guys looks blurry. Pam had seen lots of blob squatch photos. A blob squatch is any photo that looks like a dark mass and could be just about anything subject to interpretation of the viewer. Well, dear, you'd best hurry if you want to get through town before sunup. Town? There's a town around here? Pam had seen lots of ground and rocks and some green stuff, but she hadn't seen any buildings. Yes, and we don't want our neighbors to know we have you here. The mother did that over-the-shoulder look for anybody looking in from the entrance to their cave. The father took a deep breath, readying himself for the coming ordeal. Follow me, I'll have you back on your side as soon as I can. Pam wondered how it was that an entire town of Sasquatch could live on one side of a swamp and never be seen by all those Bigfoot hunters flocking to the area. She considered asking, but then why get into such things when she was about to get back home? Where was home anyway? Can I come too? The son was back to jumping around. No, son, this is far too dangerous. I wouldn't dare go but for the fact we must get rid of, or help this thing. We got to get her back to wherever she is from. The father turned for the entryway. Pam looked at the two remaining creatures. Thanks for the meal and the fire. She gave each a handshake, and then she followed the father outside. It was dark as any night Pam had ever seen. Shush, not a sound. A dupe was scanning the rocks as if looking for snipers. Follow me, he whispered and began down the side of the cliff. Pam looked over the edge into total darkness. How am I supposed to follow you down that? Dupe stuck his head up over the top. Just look at where I step and follow. I can't see anything. It's too dark. Pam looked around and saw nothing. What do you mean you can't see anything? Dupe would have looked skeptical, but Pam couldn't even see that much of him. Pam heard what sounded like a deep sigh. Okay, climb aboard. He tipped one shoulder down to allow Pam access to his massive form. If you bite me, I'll throw you off of this cliff. He sounded more worried than he was being angry. Pam tried to get one hip up onto his shoulder, but it just didn't work. Dupe got tired of waiting, and he grabbed her around the waist and plopped her down on one shoulder. Once more, Pam was being carried like a sack of bird food. He bounded down the cliff face as if running along any city street. "Hey, Dupe, what you got there?" A voice came from the dark to Pam's right. Just taking the trash out." Dupe kept going, vanishing down the cliff face. Pam did her best to look like a sack of trash. It seemed to take forever, or at least a few minutes, to get down to the bottom of the cliff, but all things came to an end, and for Pam, this couldn't end too soon. "Okay, get off before somebody sees you." Dupe did remember to stoop down, so Pam only had to fall 5 feet instead of 8. Thanks, I really appreciate your help." Pam felt that much closer to home. "Is it always so cold around here?" She felt the big rip down the front and the back of her shirt. "Cold?" Dupe looked around him. "This feels great." He threw his head back and let go with a howl. He did cut it short. "Oops, I forgot where I was." Pam wrapped her arms around herself, and still really nice of you to help out. They started walking. It didn't take but a few steps for Dupe to get way far ahead. He stopped and waited for Pam to catch up before setting out again. "You got skinny little legs. This might take all night." Sorry, but this is about as tall as I'm ever going to get." Pam's mother had just a bit taller than her. Dupe reached over and pulled Pam up and onto his shoulder. At least this time she was sitting facing the right direction. "If you bite me, oh, never mind." He strode along as if not a care in the world, and Pam felt invigorated as the trees came and went. That one time Dupe forgot she was up there and knocked her off with a low branch, well, that was just an accident. The trees grew closer together. The ground grew squishy underfoot. The sound of animals and bugs made became quite distinct. It sounded like what Pam figured a swamp should sound like. She wasn't the least bit afraid of alligators, since she was way up here on the Sasquatch perch. But then she got to thinking, do snakes climb trees? She hoped she wouldn't find out tonight. The swamp kept getting swampier. Pam didn't recognize any of the scenery until she hung her head down and looked down at the ground they had just traveled over. I had no idea this was a swamp. It's what connects your land to ours. Dupe was beginning to warm up to his hairless creature, but just a bit. "I don't want to complain, but how much farther do you think it might be?" Pam was getting colder as the night got darker. She looked at the sky and saw the moon was full, but it looked kind of bluish. "It's all relative. See, the barrier between your world and ours is kind of here and there at the same time. You don't just go there, you kind of walk along and wind up on the other side." He sounded as if he was making up some of this. "I don't really know how it works. I just know somewhere over there," he pointed at a distant tree, "is the gateway to your world." "But you can find it." Pam was hoping very much he'd say yes. "Yes and no. I've been there a time or two, but it's not like walking to the corner leaf pile." He thought about how to enlighten this illiterate bumpkin as to life's major problems. "We'll walk to where the gateway should be and see if I can pass you through it." "It sounds as if we're on another planet." Pam was trying to be funny. "That's it. You just put into words what I was trying to explain." Maybe she wasn't that slow. "You're kidding me, aren't you?" "It's kind of like the same world, but on a different plane of reality." Dupe had listened intently as Groof, the elder, the oldest elder that is, tried to explain what those little hairless things that came wandering by once in a while were. The trees were tall and thick. The moon had run its course across the sky. Dupe went right, then he went left. He ducked under a fallen down tree, and then he jumped over a log. Pam had no idea as to where they were, just so long as she got back to where she had been. There, over by that tree, Duke pointed to a tree that looked exactly like every tree Pam had seen. You just walk to the right and circle around behind it, and you'll be home. I think. That sounded less certain than he should have. Thanks for everything you guys have done. Pam gave Dupe a handshake and then walked to the tree he had indicated. She stuck her head around to look before committing her entire body. The back of the tree looked just like any tree. There were more trees and mud and the sound of creatures scuttling about. She looked back at Dupe and waved, and then she leaned against the trunk for support and stepped around the tree and nearly got eaten by Tyrannosaurus Rex. Rex is a good name for a monster that can eat you with one bite. His head was about as big as Pam's entire body. She would have been a tasty snack if not for the fact that Pam was shoved backwards by the nasty, rotten, smelly blast of hot air coming from its throat. The front of her shirt was plastered by a fine spray of dinosaur drool. Pam wound up on her backside once more. No bruises were acquired this time because she landed in a puddle of nice soft mud. The look on her face told Dupe there was something wrong with this gateway. She lay there, too stunned to be scared. Was that not the right tree? Dupe looked around as if concerned somebody would see he had screwed up royally. There was a dinosaur. Pam tried to get the image out of her mind. A dinosaur. She was still laying there, slowly settling into the mud. I take it you don't have dinosaurs where you're from? Dupe knew there weren't dinosaurs in Pam's world, but he didn't want to admit he had taken her to the wrong world. Pam sat up, mud dripping from her forehead, and gave her makeup an entirely new look. There was a dinosaur. It nearly ate me. Her head felt numb. There was warm dinosaur spit all over the front of her shirt. Did I mention there was a dinosaur? Dupe looked around, trying to pick out the right tree. Oh, it's that tree over there, he pointed to the tree that still looked like all the others. Pam got to her feet and stood up. Both boots sunk in, allowing mud to ooze down inside. Dinosaur! She looked at the tree, wondering why the monster was on one side of it, but not visible from where she stood. Dupe gave her a slight push, wanting to get done with this hairless creature and back home to his family. Oh, look at the time. Best get going before you're missed. He got her stumbling along towards what he hoped was the right gateway this time. Pam walked along without thinking. She would have continued around the back of the tree had she not gotten her shorts snagged on a thorn bush. Her head and shoulders did make it part way around. The mud in her hair flashed to ice. The mud became frozen mask on her face. This didn't look like the piney woods, not one tiny bit. Pulling her top back around the tree, Pam looked at Dupe through icicles that had formed on her eyelashes. Did you just come from the frozen tundra of the Russian steppes? Pam waited for her lips to thaw. That was not where I came from. Dupe was beginning to worry. If he didn't get this thing back to its world, what was he supposed to do with it? He considered running away, acting as if nothing had happened, but Makata would ask him how it went, and he'd have to lie, and then she'd figure it out and send him back down here to look for this thing again. He scanned the trees around him. This looks like the right place. Maybe we should try that one. It looked right to him. Pam looked to one more tree that looked like thousands of others. You sure? Maybe the third time was the charm. Let me just have a peek. Pam slowly stuck her head around the rough bark, just enough to get a look behind the mighty pine. The volcano was just erupting. The heat felt great after that ice from a minute ago. It curled the hair on the right side of her head and kind of removed one eyebrow. Her face felt sunburned. Pam yanked back and stood looking at Dupe. You don't really know which tree it is, do you? She gave him her best hard look. The sleeve of her t-shirt was blackened to a crisp, and it fell away as ash. Well, see, I've only been here once or twice. I thought this was the place. Maybe it's that tree, or that one. He swung his enormous hand in several directions. Pam really wanted to get back home, but she didn't want to die in the process. Is there someone you know who just might know how to get me back home? Pam was feeling just a tiny bit lost. The mirror world had been really weird, but it was connected to her world by all those windows into places that she could associate with. This place didn't even feel like home. Dupe didn't want anybody to know he'd been hanging around foreigners. I guess I might ask Groof. Oh man, this is just the worst. If Groof found out that Dupe and his family had been in contact with one of these hairless entities, he might not speak to them ever again. Dupe interlaced his fingers and twiddled his thumbs. This seemed to help get his brain in order. I don't suppose you'd like to stay here and keep looking while I nip on home before the sun comes up. Pam was soaked with muddy water. She was shivering from the cold air. Going home was becoming less important than not dying from exposure. I guess you've done all you can. This is my problem, not yours. Go ahead and I'll see what I can do. Dupe hated it when things like this were forced into his lap. Why can't life be just eating berries and walking in the woods? He picked up Pam and slung her over one shoulder. We can try this again later, and he took off at a run back to his cave. Back in the human world, Cassandra was trying to discern if Hilda and Hildy were in fact the same person. Prince Wapo had told Carol that the new receptionist was far better than the last one. She had some issues, but nothing too extreme. He didn't know anything about Hildy and Hilda sharing the same body. Cassandra had tried sneaking up from behind and peering around the corner to see if maybe Hildy or Hilda would let slip some vital clue as to their relationship, whether actual or imagined. Cassandra could only stare at the back of Hildy's head for so long before being called away to perform a healing on some needing customer. After too many tries and not any kind of a revelation, she decided to try a new strategy. Cassandra went sneaking upstairs to enlist the aid of fellow paranormal operatives. The door to room 3D was open just a crack. Most doors in the BAG mansion either wouldn't close right or had a tendency to open as somebody walked along the hallway. It had to do with spirits or the house being old as it was. Cassandra slipped in. For such a large woman, she was very light on her feet, as if her feet might not actually touch the ground. Dolores, I need your help, Cassandra whispered. Okay, what do you need me to do? Dolores had visions of an assault on somebody's office, maybe Madame Dingus. It would be fun to storm in and... I need for you to do your scrying and see if Hilda and Hildy are the same person. Oh, I was hoping for something a bit more dramatic. Dolores sat in front of a dresser with a nice ornate oval mirror mounted on the back. She scooted her chair over so she was facing the mirror at an angle and got busy looking into the reflected scene. I see Hilda. It must be Hilda. Those shoes look dangerous. She's clomping around the kitchen. There's somebody sitting at the table. Well, the other person looks a lot like her, but... oh, it's her mother. Dolores shifted about a bit. There are only 2 plates on the table. She got to her feet and placed her face right up against the looking glass. Now that's odd. Hilda put a 3rd plate on the table, and then her mother picked it up and put it back in the cabinet. Cassandra had no scrying ability whatsoever, but she was still willing to listen to her coworker. What do you think? Are they the same person or not? Yes. No. I'm not sure. Maybe. Dolores wasn't even sure if what she was seeing was current or from the past. If you figure it out, let me know, okay? Cassandra slipped out the door to inquire from the next person on her list. As they got near the town, Dupe looked for something to disguise his burden. Not that Pam was heavy, but she weighed on him like a misdeed he had nothing to do with. The best place to find things was the trash pit. It was where everyone disposed of things they couldn't eat and didn't want laying around their homes. Dupe stopped at the edge of the pit and looked around. There were old bones and broken limbs and tree limbs, not Sasquatch limbs. There were also weird things that the kids had found and drug home, things nobody knew how to use or what to do with. There were lots of camping equipment, mostly broken. There were trail cameras in every size and shape. There was what looked like a car bumper. Ah, this should do nicely. He reached down and snatched up his prize. Pam was now wrapped in a furry rug of some kind. It smelled a bit nasty, but it kept the wind off and it helped keep her warm. Dupe was climbing the cliff, hoping no one was up at this hour. The sun was up, so everybody should be down. He should have been asleep long ago. Hey, Dupe, what you got over your shoulder? It looks dead. I found this old skin and I thought maybe Makata could make something out of it, maybe. Oh, that sounded so good. Like maybe a rug or something? Yeah, a rug or something. Dupe didn't want to stand here and make nice chit-chat with his neighbors, not right now. Is that bear skin? No, it's wolf. It's a dire wolf, I think. Dupe had thought since the thing was hairless, maybe Makata could make a hair suit for it, or at least something to cover it up so it wasn't so darn ugly. Pam did her best to pretend to be a dead wolf. It's getting late, must go. Dupe got going back to his cave. Makata met him at the entrance. You brought it back. What, you couldn't find the gateway? I thought I could, but no luck. He didn't want to say it, but I'm going to have to ask Groof. Well, put it over in the corner by the fire, and then let's get some sleep. You'll need your wits about you when you go talk to Groof. Donna had finally come to a decision. She didn't think Paula was going to accept the idea that Pam had run off to join the Foreign Legion, so she was going to have to call in reinforcements. She left the campsite up and hiked back to her jeep. She didn't bother checking her phone since the nearest cell tower was in the next county. Bouncing along the winding trail, Donna drove faster than was safe or sane. The trip back home was filled with worry and doubts. Was she doing the right thing? What if Paula's kid was dead, lying in the ravine somewhere? Who could help out? Should she call the law? Chapter 6. Who you gonna call? Driving into her yard, she stopped and jumped out. The door wasn't locked since no one was crazy enough to deal with her pack of stray dogs and Wolf, who lived under her porch. There was a phone mounted on the wall of her cabin. It was an old payphone acquired from a local junk shop. Donna had to dig out a quarter and drop it in the coin slot, and then she dialed the number and penciled on the wall just above the farmer's almanac. The phone rang, and then, "This is the BAG Company. What do you want?" It was Hildy at her best. Donna got busy trying to explain the situation without making herself look too bad. Things like her sister's kid was almost an adult, and she could take care of herself, and there was no reason to bring the law into it. Hildy had no idea what this nut job on the phone was saying. "Hang on, let me get one of the staff to answer your questions." She set the handset down and looked at the status board. Cassandra was out on a house call, and Eddie was busy reshelving books. Carol might be available. Hildy walked back to the kitchen. "Can you take a call from this fool on the phone? She claims Pam Bogus is lost in the woods." Hildy didn't wait for a response. She just walked back to her desk and got busy with her usual routine. doing nothing. Carol had been in the middle of an important objective. She was listening to all the reasons she should be the recipient of the new, now available dining room as her new office. Pam is lost in what woods? And Carol walked out to see what was going on with Pam. Donna was trying to act as if all was well with her world. It's not like I did anything wrong. She just wasn't the outdoors type. She was beginning to worry. She was beginning to consider calling the law. I hope it never gets that bad. The dogs began their yelping and barking to announce the arrival of someone Donna more than likely didn't want to see. A camouflaged pickup was driving into the yard. At least it looked like a pickup. The vehicle was a Honda Ridgeline, which some would argue is not a real pickup, but those who drive them swear by them. The vehicle stopped next to her sister's kid's car. Donna felt as if this was the wrong way to refer to the missing girl. The dogs were all barking and jumping around until the driver stepped out and said, "Knock it off." The dogs all immediately stared at this man and sat. Mr. Armstrong looked around the yard as if expecting an attack at any minute. His eyes fell on Donna like the scope of a sniper's rifle. One hand was halfway into his jacket, ready to snatch up his favorite pistol. "You the one that lost Pamela Bogus?" This wasn't so much a question as an accusation. The other doors opened, disgorging an assortment of city folks. From the passenger side, a giant stepped out and stretched its back. It took Donna several seconds to realize this was a woman. It was that knee-length, old-time, frilly black dress that kind of gave it away. The rest of the passengers jumped out from the rear seat. Carol Munchausen, the pet psychic, had been in charge of rounding up the rescue party. Bill Palmerhausen looked as if his clothes were bothering him. He was supposed to find things, and, well, Pam needed finding. Barbara was the last member of the search party. She had brought along several ghost hunting gadgets that just might help out in their quest. No one was quite sure how a ghost hunting device could find a very much alive teenager, but you had to use the things available to you. She'd also been a Girl Scout at one time, so she was a natural, or at least if anybody needed cookies, she had connections. Cassandra had wanted to come, but she just wasn't built for traveling through the woods. Being as wide as she was tall, she had opted to stay at the office and try to organize the psychics into a remote viewing unit. The plan was if any of the home team found anything of value, they would send word by way of mirror. Carmen would send word to Hortense by scrying. This had never been done before and probably would work as well as any harebrained idea, but there just might be a first time. Madame Dingus thought the whole thing was just an annoyance. Then she remembered the dining room had yet to be assigned as someone's office space, so she offered to use her cards to locate the missing girl. Dolores de la Noche got her biggest mirror out and sat gazing into it. She had no use for a bigger office, but she kind of liked Pam. Donna looked at the members of the BAG Company and hoped they could help. To begin with, I didn't lose her. She just kind of... Mr. Armstrong just gave her a look. Okay, I lost her. I didn't mean to, but it was dark and we were running through the woods. I thought she was with me, but when I stopped, she was gone. Donna had never felt this way in her life. What was this strange sensation? She thought about it. Then, could it be guilt? You guys didn't tell my sister anything, did you? Carol jumped in so Mr. Armstrong wouldn't do anything that could jeopardize their search. Let's go back to where you lost Pam. We'll find her, but we should get going soon. Then, as an afterthought, she added, "No, we didn't tell Paula you lost Pam. Not yet, anyway." Donna got in her Jeep and led this batch of weirdos back to her campsite. They made the 3-hour hike in record time, 2 hours and 45 minutes. They could have gone faster if not for all the gear each had brought. We probably won't need this gear, but it never hurts to be prepared, Barbara told everybody. Mr. Armstrong had only brought a few guns, not knowing what kind of problem needed shooting. What with his being an Eagle Scout at one time and now a troop master, he had come prepared for anything. Hortense looked as odd as a hiker could look. She had pulled on a pair of shiny black knee-high hiking boots to match her black leather umbrella. Her backpack was a perfect match for her knee-length dress, all black lace and frills. She had what looked like a sword hung from her belt, a flat-topped, wide-brimmed hat with a black veil topped off her ensemble. Donna would have made a derogatory remark, but thought better of it. This chick was huge. Leaving all the sleeping and eating things in camp, the search party followed Donna along the trail to where she had last seen her sister's, well, no, her niece. Barbara and Carol did their best to keep themselves between Mr. Armstrong and Pam's aunt. They didn't want any troubleshooting going on until Pam was safe and sound and back in their group. The semi-licensed investigator always acted as if he were mad at Pam for some unknown reason, but he actually liked her, in a weird sort of way. If asked, he would have said she was an annoying teenager, but he felt almost like an uncle to her, a very distant uncle, like way, way, way over on the edge of the family kind of thing. Let's see, we stopped here and took a break. Donna looked at the tree trunk they had used to sit on while she filled her sister's, no, her niece, in on some of her mom's, that's Pam's mom's, in misdeeds. There was something moving through the trees over there. We started down this path, and then she was gone. Now Donna was beginning to miss having Pam around. Hortense pulled a snow globe out of her bag and looked intently at it. She finally said, "She's not here, not anywhere around here. I don't see any sign of her." Barbara was swinging in every direction, waving an electronic device around and looking at the dials. "I'm not getting anything." Mr. Armstrong pulled a roll of toilet paper from his Alice pack. Everyone began looking around so they wouldn't think about what he was about to do. Mr. Armstrong wrapped some paper around a tree branch. "There. Now we can find this spot in case we get confused." He looked at his collection of searchers. "We'll split up and go in every direction, look for footprints or signs of a struggle." Carol went looking for animals in the area she could ask questions of. Her being a pet psychic, she could get information from any furry creature, or scaly creature for that matter, or anybody with feathers. Barbara kept waving her gadgets around, but had little hope it would find Pam. The meter was more for energy spikes than finding missing girls. Bill sat down on a log and closed his eyes. "And just what do you think you're doing?" Donna didn't know anything about psychics except that they were a bunch of weirdos. "I find things. That's how I work. I think about what's been lost and an idea comes to me as to where to look." He closed his eyes and tried to concentrate on finding Pam. He had, so far, found 0 people. So far in his career. Things, yes. People, no. Hortense walked along the trail. Every so often she would shake her snow globe up and watch the white swirly things go around and around. She was having trouble with the low branches. Well, low to her. Donna thought it just maybe she should have called the local sheriff instead of this bunch of misfits. After searching for hours, the BAG people began to drag back to the rally point. The toilet-papered tree was visible from quite a ways off. Barbara walked in covered with sweat and leaves. She looked as if she'd been rolling on the ground. "I tried rolling around to see if I picked up anything from the ground." "Did you?" "Yes, leaves and dirt." Barbara would have brushed herself off, but it took too much effort. Carol had found a pack of coyotes noshing on a dead something or other. They had invited her to join them for lunch, but she'd taken a rain check. The smell was just a bit too ripe for her stomach to put up with. When asked about Pam, the coyotes all laughed about a strange looking girl they'd seen running through the woods late last night. It looked like she was being chased by one of those giant cats, the ones with tan fur and lots of teeth and claws. And Carol got the direction of Pam's last travel. She hoped the mountain lion hadn't made a meal out of Pam. Hortense just walked over, sat down, and said nothing. Mr. Armstrong was the last one back. Anyone find anything? Carol passed on her information. Donna looked at the pet psychic as if she was one of the more complete nuts. Okay, let's move over that way. Carol, lead the way. As they moved through the brush, Mr. Armstrong would mark the trail every so often with toilet paper. Carol was hesitant to lead, thinking she didn't want to be the one to stumble upon or step in the remains of Pam. She tried her best to walk the trail out without stepping on anyone. Wait, stop, there's something here. Barbara was looking at her meter. I'm getting a spike. There's some kind of an energy feel around that tree. She pointed at a tree like any other. They gathered around the tree in question, everybody looking and searching for any sign of their missing coworker. Mr. Armstrong got down close to the ground, and he surreptitiously pulled his glasses from his pocket and slipped them on. There's her boot prints, and she came this way all right. His glasses disappeared into his shirt. Well, there's no blood. That's a good thing. Donna, not to be outdone by some city boy, walked around the tree to pick up the sign on the other side. Nothing. She went back to where the big dude had spotted the prints. The tracks were quite clear in the mud in this kind of trail. They led right to the side of the tree and vanished. Maybe, just maybe, Donna looked up into the tree. She checked each branch before deciding Pam had not clomb the tree. Barbara looked at the horizon. The sun is going down. What's the plan? Keep looking or try again in the morning? We'll give it a few more hours. Maybe she's near here. Carol considered yelling to see if Pam would answer. Hey, give us a warning before you start yelling. Barbara had been standing right next to Carol when she let rip with an ear-shattering howl. Something she'd picked up while conversing with the local inhabitants of the zoo. Shush, listen. Way off in the distance came a return howl. That sounded like a wolf. There aren't any wolves in Texas. Donna thought about it. Well, maybe coy wolves, but not real wolves. For those of you not in the know, a coy wolf is a cross between a coyote and a wolf, thus the name coy wolf. Sure sounded like a wolf. Donna felt along her belt for her pistol, just in case. They all made the trek through the brush, circling the tree where Barbara had gotten her reading. They looked for any sign of their missing colleague. One by one, they found a place near the tree to sit and wait. Wait for somebody to find any indication of Pam's whereabouts. Sitting down on a log, Hortense's head was about level with Carol's head, who was still on her feet. I asked around, but nobody knows anything more about Pam than when she was seen last night running through this way. Hortense had difficulty coming to terms with Carol speaking to animals, but then most people thought Hortense was weird for gazing into snow globes. She had an enormous collection. Some were quite old and valuable, and others were just plastic and cheap. And she had brought a few cheapies, since it didn't matter how much you paid, but how hard you looked. She pulled out her snow globe and took a long gander. I think she's in a cave somewhere. Donna just smirked. Aren't any caves in this part of the piney woods? Well, it looks like a cave to me. Hortense wasn't about to be put down by an inattentive aunt of Pam's. Even though she'd only met her Monday, Hortense felt close to Pam as a fellow psychic, like a long-lost sister who had just come into her life, only to be ripped away by this loser of young girls. Once again, Mr. Armstrong was the last one to quit. His shirt had just a suggestion of sweat stain down the back. One boot had a scuff of mud across the toe. I'm about done in. Let's see if we can find the camp. We'll try again in first light. Bill Palmerhausen was feeling totally defeated. He could find nothing to say Pam had come this way. Most of the search party had swapped out batteries in their flashlights. Several had already run out completely. They were all quiet on the march back to camp. The feeling of defeat weighed heavy on most. Pam awoke to a nice warm toasty feel. She looked around her room and nearly screamed. She was in a cave, and this was no dream. She tried to comb her hand through her hair, but found a mass of burnt wire on the right side of her head. As she was about to stand up, she discovered her clothing was gone. She was covered with a hairy outfit reminiscent of a caveman, or a cave woman, well, a cave girl. She had on a wolf-hide jumper Makata had sewn together for her. It was kind of smelly, but it was warm and it felt furry. Her hiking boots looked odd with her caveman outfit, as she could hear voices. No, you can't see it. It's sleeping. No, you'll wake it up and it might be dangerous. No, you can't touch it. It bites. These voices made sleep a thing of the past, and Pam sat up and looked around the cave. There was a gasp. Not one, but several, all done at once. Pam focused on about 15 of these hairy creatures, all looking at her. The looks on their faces showed a mixture of astonishment and fear. Lord, that thing's ugly. It has no hair, well, at least on the right side. How can it be dangerous? It's so small. Well, so's a skunk, but you wouldn't want to pet one. Pam looked from one creature to the next. One or two looked familiar. The others all looked somewhat different. Did I miss something? It can speak. Yes, and it makes semi-intelligent conversation as well. This sounded like Dupe. He looked somewhat perturbed by all the visitors. All right, you guys have seen it now, so run along. It's time I feed it before the poor thing starves to death. This came from Makata. Pam rubbed her face only to discover that one eyebrow was missing, and she had a nasty sunburn. That was some exciting day yesterday. Patting the side of her hair, Pam wondered just how bizarre her looks had gotten. You don't happen to have a mirror, do you? Makata just looked at Pam with a question on her face. Food, come eat. And she made a kind of a coaxing motion with her hand. Pam walked over and took her place at the table rock. The high chair felt kind of childish. I'm sorry about all those gawkers. I have no idea how they found out you were here. Makata gave Ku a stern motherly look. Ku did his best to try to look innocent. It wasn't me. I didn't say anything. They offered me cash. I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. Can we keep it? Now, we need to wait and see if your father gets any ideas from Groof. Makata set the cooked piece of meat in front of Pam. Now that the whole town knows we have a thing, I'll never hear the end of it. Dupe had a forlorn look. It wasn't that bad. Most of our neighbors just wanted to see one up close. As soon as we eat, I'm going to go talk to Groof. Hopefully he'll know what to do. Dupe hoped he wouldn't throw them out. Pam wrapped the wolfskin cloak around her shoulders. The wind outside the cave was blowing cold. Dupe led her across the summit to the bunch of caves on the other side of the mountain. As they went, Pam could hear voices. Look, there it is. I thought you said it didn't have any hair. It looks like a two-legged wolf. Pam tried to stay close to Dupe. So far, him and his family hadn't ate her or beat her over the head with a club. These new Sasquatch just might not be quite as well-mannered. Dupe kept looking over his shoulder as if hoping Pam was no longer there. Pam kept looking over her shoulder because a crowd had started to follow her, intent on seeing what she might do, like fly or burst into flames. One had shown up holding a long pole with which he was trying to touch her. Dupe stopped in front of a cave. It looked like all the other caves, but to him it had the same distinct appearance. Groof, you in? A dupe took one last look at Pam's direction with the potential of her having gone away. Come on in. The voice was rough, as if the owner had smoked a case of cigarettes every day for life. Dupe hung his head and entered. Pam was right on his heels. Ah, you and Grampus had another kid? Kind of skinny. Groof was sitting in front of a roaring fire, a handful of corn stalks clutched in one fist. He looked like what an old Sasquatch should look like. His hair was mostly gray, and there was a bald spot on top of his arched dome. No, that's Ding. I'm Dupe. My kid's name is Quoo. Oh, Quoo. You look like you could use more of this than I could. The old Sasquatch handed the corn stalks to Pam. Pam accepted the handful, not knowing what else to do. Dupe began to search the walls of the cave for an answer to his agonizing dilemma. Pam, being cold, had tried to get closer to the fire. Groof grabbed her, lifted her up onto his lap. So, tell me, young man, what would you like for Christmas? Pam tried to remember the last time anybody had asked her this. Oh, yes, she'd been 12 years old and just about to discover that Santa Claus had a lot of brothers running around town. Pam found her mind had gone blank. Dupe looked as if he might just leave. Groof, he's not my, you have a hairless thing on your lap, a squealer. Groof looked at Dupe, then he squinted at Pam. Good Lord, they're ugly. Pam was getting a bit of a complex, what with everybody saying she was ugly and all. Dupe, you haven't told anybody about this thing, have you? Dupe kicked a rock on the floor. No, not a soul. There was a commotion at the entrance to the cave as several dozen Sasquatch all tried to see what was going on. As for Quoo, I'm afraid he might have mentioned it to everybody. Well, we should see about getting it back to its home. Any idea where it crossed over? The old Sasquatch looked at Dupe, and then he focused on Pam. I think I crossed over on the east side of the swamp, she told the old guy. Pam was busy trying to get her feet on the floor. Even for an old guy, he was strong grip. It's ugly and it can talk. Groof suddenly stood up and began to pace the floor of his cave, his hands clutched behind his back. Pam managed to land on her softest parts. She could just imagine how bruised her backside must be. At least that's where Quoo said he picked me up. She sat down on the rock that Groof had been sitting on and then sprang to her feet. I think I broke something. The east side of the swamp. That's impossible. There are no gateways to the world on the east side. Groof looked at Pam and then at Dupe, then back at Pam. It sounds as if it can understand our language. Groof quickly grew tired from his pacing and resumed his seat by the fire. Pam, not knowing what to do, handed him the cornstalks. Why, thank you. Such a nice little creature. It's just too bad you're so darned ugly. He looked at Pam and then said, Maybe I shouldn't have said that. He scratched his head. You're visibly challenged, little subject. And with that, I am going to break for the end of the show. And if you've enjoyed the story so far, be sure and tune in for the next exciting episode of the Bogus Company Go Squatching. Till next time.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.